Warning: this program may contain explicit language that may be considered offensive or inappropriate to children and some adults.
The following content is intended for mature audiences only.
Well, Mo, what are you doing? All right, so welcome to another episode of Talk It Out, where we talk it out. I am your host for tonight, Ricky Z. Thankful to be here tonight, and thank you for joining us as we talk about critical race theory, the hot button issue in politics when it really shouldn't be today. So, Talk It Out is a place where people of opposing views can get together and have a healthy and productive dialogue in a respectful way. Keeping in mind that it's not always about proving who's right and who's wrong. Sometimes it's simply about listening and being heard. Okay, so before we introduce our panelists for tonight, I want to make sure that you guys like and share, subscribe. Make sure you like our YouTube channel and our Facebook page. Make sure you share this video right now. Share it right now with your family and friends, and so let them so they can watch. Hey Dre, friend of the show, Dre. Thank you for joining us. All right, so without further ado, we're going to introduce our panelists. So one of them is Mo. We all know Mo. And I'll introduce them in a little while, but right now they're having technical difficulties. So I'm going to start with Miss Hannah Von Savong. So Miss Hannah is the mother of two girls and has been married to recurring Talk It Out panelist PJ Von Savong for almost 19 years. And in that time has been a stay-at-home mom, a non-traditional college student earning her BA in communication at Columbus State University. Go Cougars. A freelance creator, social media manager, overzealous volunteer, and realtor. And according to her, this is why her gray hair was earned. She currently resides in Georgia, where she has lived most of her life. So welcome to the show, Hannah Von Savong. How are you doing tonight? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if that worked. Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you? Doing well.
Doing very well. I'm excited about this topic. I think it's an important one. Looking forward to talking it out with everybody.
Awesome, great, thank you. All right, so our next panelist, we all know this person. Really doesn't need an introduction, but we'll do it anyway. So Mo Smith, a critical thinker that's too conservative to be a liberal and too liberal to be a conservative. You can check out their social media. Mo Smith Pro. So I'm gonna let them do the spiel, but welcoming Mo.
Hello everyone. Hello, good evening. Hello, America. It is I. We are here. We're here. We're queer. Get used to it. Happy Pride to everyone. I know it's the starting of a new month, but guess what? What have you done today to make you feel proud? Okay, because Pride is 365. I've stated it. I've spoken. That's what's going on. And also, if you feel it in your spirit, if you feel it in your heart and soul and spirit, you can always check out my Cash App. No amount too small for the podcast that you're listening and not seeing my wonderful face. Make sure you use $MOESMITH P as in Paul RO, everyone.
Thank you, Mo, for joining us tonight. All right,
Thank you.
Our new panelist, I'm very excited to have this person join us tonight. This person is a great person to get perspective from, and he shares it with love, and on occasion he shares it with shade, and it's the best thing ever. So Mr. Isaiah Harper. So he's a public thinker that has been an educator for 18 years, particularly in the fine arts education. He's a graduate of Florida State in English education and Troy University in educational administration. Welcome to the show, Mr. Isaiah Harper.
Hello. Rarely does it happen. No, sometimes. Not frequently.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. Hello, everyone. How are you?
Hi.
All right. So before we get into our current events, like always, we got to take a quick commercial break. So we'll be right back.
What am I actually telling my body?
Nope.
What am I actually telling my body? And the things that our body needs to survive, you can't weigh it down with all that junk, all the chips, cookies, cakes, and pies. You know what I'm saying? Like, think about that. And I know for me, that's my struggle. My weakness is sweets. Because I'm going to be honest with you. I had already planned when I got this video to make a run to Del Taco real quick and get one of them sweet cheesecake bites. Let me tell y'all something. Them things will make you slap your mama. They're so good. Lord have mercy. Is that drool? Stuff done got me drooling.
And that was a commercial.
I heart her.
He is a fellow Columbus, Georgia native. Well, not native to Columbus, but lives in Georgia. And that is part of her show, the Mompreneur Plug. She has a YouTube channel. I think they just changed to Amazon Live. You know, Amazon has their own like thing now where you can create content, and yeah, it's a big deal. And also like share the different like items you'd like to buy from them. But no,
Of course.
I know. Hey,
Capitalism, of course.
look,
Marketing. Gotta love it.
look. But shout out to the Mompreneur Plug, and shout out to Tam, doing some great work. If you haven't seen her YouTube videos yet, like she's hilarious. So first, we're going to talk about some current events, and I haven't decided yet. Should we? Well, none of these are really light. None
No.
of them are light. So let's get started with like the newest thing right now. It's Mr. Bill Cosby released from prison. So he has been in prison for 3 years for charges of drugging and sexual assault. And I think it was only for one victim, although we know that there are multiple. But this is for the one. But that conviction was overturned basically due to a technicality, due to a rights violation. So he did a deposition before he was officially charged, pretty much admitting to doing those things, pretty much admitting to those charges, but was promised prior to the deposition that he would not be charged. And then the prosecutor turned around and then eventually charged him. And so the courts were like, you reneged, so this is...
I'll be honest, I couldn't even read it the first day. Like I just couldn't. I heard it, I saw a photo, and I was like, you know what? My brain doesn't need this.
Well, let me further clarify. It was a previous prosecutor, which was Bruce Castor Jr., which is also the attorney that represented Donald Trump in his second impeachment trial. Well, let's start there. He made this deal with Bill Cosby due to the fact that I'm not really surprised he made this deal based on the evidence at the time, because she waited a year before she filed charges against Bill Cosby, which regardless, that still was in the statute of limitations. She had to get therapy for it because, I mean, yeah, that was a traumatic experience. So, and furthermore, what really kind of messed things up is that he made that deal, and the following prosecutor was like, yeah, this is a crappy deal. Like, why did we do this? I didn't sign up for this. So guess what, Bill Cosby, you need to come and come down to the courthouse, and we're gonna have this good old trial. So I mean, to me, what really tears my hide up is that there's a piece of my community, the African American community, that is kind of rejoicing over this. There was tweets by Felicia Rashard, who played
Mhm.
his wife in the
Claire
Cosby
Huxtable.
Show,
Mhm.
Claire Huxtable, saying that rejoicing and that justice has happened. No, justice
Aunt
hasn't
Viv,
happened.
Aunt Viv has torn her up tonight, and I was there
which
for that.
which I
First,
love.
yeah, yeah, and
And
that's really the only thing I could get out of this was she was like, "Look, girl, you need to shut your mouth. This is stupid. Say you're happy you're out of jail, but everybody knows."
You should have kept that in the drafts.
that was
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
thing. That was the key thing about her statement, that everyone knew in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone knew. So of course that means she knew. And also Bill Cosby walked her
Well,
down the
not
aisle when she was
necessarily.
marrying Bill
Not
Bashar.
necessarily. She did not necessarily know. People who are narcissists, people who have master manipulators, can keep things masterfully. And Bill Cosby's no fool. Like, he is no fool. So it would not surprise me if he kept it from her, if he kept the Bill Cosby look, or if he kept things offset, because that is a very tight, closed world, and he is a master manipulator. He is a master at making his rules. For the love of God, he turned like on black folks in the early 2000s before all of this. The reason he got in trouble was because a black comedian made it okay to make fun of Bill Cosby.
Mm.
Like, that's when it happened. And when that started, people went in. But yeah, so I think she should have shut up. I think she should have kept her mouth shut. Sometimes silence is a virtue. She should have been quiet, like rejoice in private. Viv should have tore her up, because you know that women are hurting.
Well,
As
and it
far
plays
as
in.
the law is concerned, this is where it's a double-edged sword. And I look at this as a black man, obviously. If I go into a prosecutor and I make an agreement and you get a confession, I don't care what it is. It could be anything from rape, murder to a minor possession. And you make an agreement, and that agreement, like, you have a right to remain silent. You have that right. And the way they coerced it out of him was saying, you will not get, it's a crappy deal. It should go down as prosecutorial misconduct. Right. But I get why the judge overthrow it, because you have to look at, if I was the judge, I would say, you did this under this circumstance. We got this confession under these circumstances. These circumstances were not upheld. And because these circumstances were not upheld, I have to throw this out. You, prosecution, did a crappy job. And there are a lot of people who get off of horrible crimes because the prosecution was garbage. Not
OJ?
the defense. I mean, the prosecution. And that's what this was. So,
Right, but at the
I'd
same
rather
time,
see him die in jail.
I don't want to give full I don't want to give full fault with the prosecution per se, because that prosecutional misconduct that you're talking about is never going to be charged, because Bill Castor is no longer a prosecutor. So the current prosecutor at the time of the case being brought to court was a black woman, and she saw that there was there was injustice within that that former prosecutor. But unfortunately, there was nothing to be done because he already quit his job.
Mhm.
So
Not knowing
unfortunately.
if, and I'd have a question, a point of clarity. If his testimony was used, right? So, like, when you look at that case, and I think his testimony was used. If I was the prosecutor coming in going, you son of a biscuit, I don't know what your rules are in here, and you say, you son of a biscuit, you screwed me and all these women. Now I have to go about this a different way. because I can't use this in order to make something stick. Like, it sucks. Like, it's absolute BS, but the judge was right.
Right. I'm not saying that the judge. I'm not saying that the judge was wrong, but I'm just giving a point of clarity. Is that Bill Castor was the one that made the mistake, not the district attorney at the time of Bill Cosby's court trial, criminal trial.
Well, did she use
Now,
the testimony? Did she use the testimony knowing the agreement, the arrangement in which it was brought in?
So did she know the agreement though? That'd be my next question.
She didn't get, she didn't sign off of that agreement. Again, it was a previous.
Whether she signed off on it or not, if she knew how the evidence was obtained,
I don't know.
I get
it. I get it.
I get what you're saying, but all the way around. And unfortunately, we have another issue of not a black man being railroaded, but unfortunately, it's a classism issue. This man has a lot of money, and he was able to use his money in order to get off, all based on the technicality.
Right, he power, and really, the root
money
of this.
can do that.
Yeah.
Well,
money will do that. You're right.
And so like I like to keep in mind that like this isn't with the folks that are like happy about this turn of events. Like, does this not do they not understand? Like, this is not because he was found innocent. It was because right, but like I get that, but it's just like
because they didn't believe it from the beginning.
That's
right,
true.
And I think
he's the one that confessed. Like he told his side.
It doesn't matter.
They rewrite
because in their eyes, because in their eyes, quite honestly, it was her fault because she shouldn't have been there to begin with. That's in their mindset.
Well, and that's kind of what I'm getting at is like at the core of this is women, like our struggle with reporting this, with having the courts pay attention to it, having a case pushed through. I just keep thinking about Brock Turner or whatever his name was, where they found him
they
guilty.
got 6 months.
Yeah, and they still let him go because he's a
3 months later.
Man. And you know what, that young girl, she came out, she is brave. I follow her on Instagram. She's an amazing person, but she has to wake up and live with that every single day over losing power of her body and not being able to do anything about it and basically being looked at as a harlot, being in the wrong place at the wrong time. You shouldn't have anything to drink. You should feel bad about your body. It's all of that stuff. And it's the same game over and over and over for all of womanhood.
But again, patriarchy is still rooted within white supremacy. Yeah. So, and in the misogyny of it, it's also rooted in white supremacy. And a lot of, I get, with some of my family, I like to call them my family, as far as a black man as basically being have an opportunity to get over on the system. We've had that happen with the O.J. Simpson trial back in '94. So I get these instances, but at the same time, she was, if I remember correctly, she was on POC. So how many times do POC I think majority black of them women? Well, no, the majority of them were Caucasian, but in this case, the actual case, she was POC. But the point of it is that how many black women have to, and POC women have to be sacrificed in order for black men to, I guess get over or succeed in life or, feel better about themselves. Now, I get the other caveat that black men have been wrong. There are certain injustices that could be a whole nother show about within itself. But at the same time, is it fair to do that at the expense of a POC woman?
Both can be true. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think the problem is the hypocrisy of it too. They'll take a case. Sorry, Isaiah, you go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the problem with this is the hypocrisy of it, like going, oh yeah, he's off, he got off, but in the same turn, they'll use that as an example because they did this with OJ, they did this with Michael. They'll turn around and go, well, that's just a sign that the system is wrong. And I'm talking about it from the white side of things too. Is like, well, look, they got away with murder, they got away with whatever. It just, there's really no winning no matter what. So I don't know. It's complicated.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Speaking of someone, so we're going on to the next part. Speaking of someone who has not been freed, I got to talk about it. The Free Britney movement. Yes, we got to talk about Britney.
So sad.
Yes. So last week she was gave her testimony in court. She had filed. She had put in a request to remove her father, Jamie Spears, as co-conservator of her conservatorship. So she gave her testimony last week, talking about the fact that she has no control over her money, visitation with her kids. She isn't able to get married, or she's not allowed to get. She has a IUD inside place in her,
removed.
and it's not allowed to be removed. She wants another child, and
she doesn't even have control over her own attorney or psychiatric care.
Exactly. They choose her attorney for her. I think the idea is that she wants to not have to be able to go through a psychiatric evaluation for it to be even considered for the conservatorship to end. But the main thing is that her father, Jamie Spears, has this much control over her and over the people in her group that she's surrounded with. And he makes bukus of money off of it. I'd say, what's it, $16K a what?
Oh, yeah. I don't remember what the statistic was, but I know she said she made $60 million in the last, 6 years or something like that. Mm-hmm. And he gets paid to do what he wants with her.
Yeah.
Force her to perform.
No, actually, that's Jamie Lynn Spears. Jamie Lynn Spears is the executive over the trust fund. That's $60 million. So she gets that $1.3 million annually off of that.
Yes.
That's growing in the trust fund. Mm-hmm. He also gets separate monies for any new work that she does, or any new touring, or the Vegas.
They can make her work.
Mm-hmm. Right, because she also gave testimony basically stating that when she was tired of doing the Vegas regency, they were like, oh, okay, that's fine. And then her next psychiatrist appointment, they were like, well, maybe we need to change your drug medication, your regimen. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's something wrong with that.
Her not being cooperative. And
right. And then the whole thing about her not taking her pills with the dance, she said the dancers were alleging that, but she was like, I never took my pills in front of the dancers. I always take my pills in the morning before rehearsal with a nurse for years.
Yeah.
So I'm like, something in the milk ain't clean here.
No. I will say I was super excited. I heard tonight that the other party of the conservatorship, the whatever trustees, they've backed out. They hadn't gotten paid anything. They were supposed to join in and help Jamie out. But they were like, nope, we clearly see that this is a case of somebody who does not feel like their interests are being represented, and we're not going to sign off on it.
And so,
and
also, go ahead.
Also, today, the judge the judge issued a new decree today. Apparently, the brief wasn't filed, or there was no formal motion.
Mm-hmm.
There was no formal motion. So the judge really was limited in what she can do. She's still in the conservatorship, but she is now allowed to hire her own attorney.
That's good.
She's now allowed to hire her own attorney. Her father is still the conservator at large, if you will. He issued a statement that he was not in charge of the mental health. That was a different faction of it. And he's started an investigation. I'm anti everybody named Jamie. I'm an old school Britney Spears fan, don't come for me.
And that includes Jamie Lynn Spears, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of people saying she catch them hands. It's ready to eat for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, Zoe. Okay.
But here's the startling thing. A lot of her trajectory with Britney Spears kind of coincide a little bit with Amy Winehouse. So what I
Mm,
fear at this point, since they are not letting her out of that conservatorship anytime soon, is that she's going to end up in a very similar situation as Amy Winehouse. And I'm
mm,
I'm praying that that does not come to that. But the morbid statements that she's been making on her social media,
yeah,
I'm concerned. I really am. Just on a human level. I wasn't never really a fan of her work, but at the same time, just on a human level, like that
yeah.
really sucks. And
I mean,
I
trapped
just
without any way of getting out. I mean, at some point, you got to go like, well, I can't make anything happen for myself. What are my other options? And, big, like, please don't do that, people. You are special and we want you to stay here. But, like, that feeling of hopelessness has got to be overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
absolutely, and I think that this is kind of a alarm. I mean, people are like, "Oh, well, she's rich, no big deal." A lot of people in the disabled community are saying, "Hey, this could happen to anybody," and we're
Yes, I
scared
was
of
just about
this
to bring up that point.
every single day. That we say the wrong thing to the wrong person, and the next thing we know, we have no autonomy over anything because of
Mm.
ableism. So, I mean,
This
people
feels like a
really need
Victorian
to.
novel.
Mm.
Right, a Greek tragedy, all that. So, well, I hope it doesn't come to that Greek tragedy.
Oh, no,
Oof,
no.
I cringe at the thought, but I mean, ultimately, I think the what's the whole saying? The road to hell is paved with good
Oh,
intentions.
path of good
It's
intentions.
possible, right? It's possible that the dad and the family had good intentions when this initially happened, but it's like 13 years later.
Yeah.
She was going
Yeah,
through a
but
lot at that point. She was going through.
a conservatorship is normally um, like set aside for like severe cases.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and this is a major, like, there's a lot of people you mentioned. This is a major conservatorship case. And as I think that it's not going to come to an Amy Winehouse situation because she is stronger than yesterday. If you get that.
Yes.
Um, lyrics and song, it's all
No, no, no. Yes, yes.
No,
Now let's put it
I
my
get it.
way.
Like, I no, I knew the song, but I'm just not a fan of her
yeah.
music, so that's why I didn't know. I just
Okay.
entertain it. Sorry, just
Yeah,
saying.
it's all good, girl.
I got the reference.
Um,
Yeah, I know.
uh, so it's very interesting to see the cognitive abilities. Like, what do you, at what point, at what test do you actually enter into a conservatorship? Like, what point can they are hard to get out of.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things that's bringing this to light. And it corresponds very well with a lot of cases going on about autistic people on the spectrum
Mm-hmm.
in the homes and whether they can be parents. You start seeing a lot of things about autonomy. My brain is medicine's wearing off. The autonomy of their bodies, what they can do. So there's a lot of people looking at these cases, and I know a
Well,
lot of people like to think, hmm,
non-normative thinking. I mean, if you really wanted to
yes,
press it, you could push it down to ADHD, mental health disorders, depression. I know I was looking through my genealogy and found some way back, like, clearly a case of an infirm adult, like, parent. They had to take over some assets, and that's normally what you see conservatorship for, is like extreme
yeah,
cases like Alzheimer's or whatever, not necessarily 13 years for a
able-bodied adults.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
At the end of the day,
I see a lot of
Although,
people too saying, like, why, if you're forcing this on her, what about Robert Downey Jr., what about Charlie Sheen, what about Dave Chappelle? All of these people critically failed and collapsed and never had their assets taken over.
so
Right.
you mean the men?
Yes.
right, right. But
So,
also you have to add into that simple fact that um there wasn't any value within them at that particular point. Like, for example, Robert Downey Jr. Hollywood had basically casted him to the side, so there was no money in it. So of course they're not going to try
Mhm.
to snatch him up and put him into a conservatorship because it's like no money.
There's nothing like
Um,
that. It's all in
now if it happened in the prime of Iron Man, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And
But you know that
age has something to do with it. Keep in mind that this happened when she was like 21,
early 20s. Like she and the thing is, like, and she was clearly going through something, and she was still very much in the spotlight, and like, and not necessarily for her music, but just the fact that just her life in general, like she was having like, you know, things with Kevin Federline, things with her kids, like the paparazzi following her and like trapping her just to get pictures of her and her kids, and like it's almost like she was like set up that way.
Well, and
also her aunt died.
Oh yeah. But we got to bring, because that's the same time period that Diana was killed by the same paparazzi influence. Like that really should be taken. I mean, like the 90s.
It was
10 years. 2000, yeah.
10 years.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
But yeah, but
Diana
I mean, it was
died
the same.
97.
Yeah.
That's right. But
you know, a decade, it could be like 5 minutes
at this point.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I mean, it's still that same kind of mad pressure that we were seeing at that time, where it was like, you go get those photos, like get them. It doesn't matter what the cost is.
Because I think at the time, like her and her dad were not even actually on like good terms at that point. To be quite honest with you, the fact like her dad was able to slide in, and that's how he was able to get into control of the conservatorship. Like she was not on good terms with him, and it's the fact that all this stuff was going on, and no one would take the time to consider. Like I saw that documentary. I think it was the New York Post on Hulu, where they talked about like that time where we get to the conservatorship and the turmoil that she was going through. The fact that, you know, she had 2 children practically back to back, and she's dealing with postpartum depression and like not getting any treatment of it, because, you know, you normally don't realize you're dealing with postpartum depression until later in hindsight.
It can last up to a year. Postpartum can last up to a year, and it's ugly.
Yes, and then you have another kid like within that year too. Yeah,
right. And on top of it off, this is around the time when Justin Timberlake was coming out with his first album. His first album was failing. They were concerned about him as an artist because that first single he did with Pharrell, it was like, meh. And so he did that. He had that second single with Gone, and where he had that Britney Spears lookalike.
Cry Me a River. Yes.
Cry Me a River. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Yeah, because of NSYNC. Sorry. Like I said, I'm not a fan. I know the stuff, but I'm just not a fan. So the point of it is that you had that going on. He was literally in interviews talking about he was the one that first popped her cherry.
Mm-hmm.
And you have Perez Hilton that was relentless with his pursuits. And then on top of that, the only person that was really looking out for Britney was this stranger little kid that was like at the time, 14 at the time, Chris Crocker, making the video saying, leave Britney alone. Unfortunately, they were bullied to the point that they end up getting PTSD. So they had a recent interview with NPR talking about the situation, and they're saying that they're happy that that this is coming to light, but it's not about them, and they want their focus to be on Britney. And they've even posted on their social media, hey, thank you for the love. However, I'm going to say this as respectfully as possible. Please stop tagging me in this. Every time you tag me, it's triggering my PTSD.
Yeah.
I mean,
so this is not just affecting. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, because the thing about like that, Chris Crocker is literally a meme, like a iconic meme at this point. And
because in the early days of YouTube,
right, because of YouTube, and but even then, like, just think about how going back to Perez Hilton, just how like insane and incessant and brutal and cruel it was with just like those teen, early 20s, like pop, you know, icons. Britney, Christina, even like Paris Hilton and early parts of Kim Kardashian, just like the way that they, like, you know, feel how you feel about Paris and Kim, but like still, like some people benefited from all the hoopla, and some people really suffered from it. And we all know that Britney was one of them, and we've seen it. And like it's strange how, I mean, it's nice to know that, you know, we're looking back at this now and realizing that, you know, the way that we consumed all that media was hurtful. I just, it's
I
still
don't
sad
know
that
that
they.
it's changed us though. I mean, like we're like Keeping Up with the Kardashians just went off the air.
Right.
Like, we're
And they have
living
a new show,
reality
though.
TV. Yeah, I know. So it's
Yeah,
like
so
I don't
it
think
didn't
we've
technically.
changed.
Yeah.
Well, Americans, human nature is to be voyeuristic. Like, think about it. Like, we've been, like, you can go all the way back to ancient Japan, and they have the Miramachi technique. It's like on their screens, and they have it's called the blown off roof technique, and you are looking inside of everybody's houses. So there has to be a balance. So Brittany was a casualty of the human desire to be voyeuristic. Like, she was a casualty. At the end of the day, she was. But that desire is what started reality television. Rest in peace, Pedro. Like I know, Real World. You have to be old enough.
No, I got the
to
reference,
know.
but I started thinking that Real World actually started in 1992, so that really predates
Yeah.
what's going on with Britney Spears, because at that time she was still on the Disney Channel, being on the Mickey
Also,
Mouse Club. So
yeah,
I think that this is
it's
just
that
a
it's
failure of her being a child star. But I mean,
But I think the
well,
difference between like
I
Real
agree
World.
that.
Oh.
Oh, go ahead.
So the difference between like Real World is like eventually like they kind of go to the background, whereas Britney and Kim, like, it was still a constant because there was something that we always wanted from them, and the Real World didn't really gather much celebrity until MTV just kind of like seemed to make them more important towards the end or more
right,
recent.
but at the same time, you have to think about the model of it, because
Yeah.
if you look back in the 80s, Michael Jackson was on that similar platform. See, these record labels, they're pushing those narratives, or they're calling the TMZs and the tabloids. Well, Michael Jackson time it was a National Enquirer, but so basically now that we have more access to more information, of course, there's going to be a more demand for said information.
And the rise of
But
the
this is
internet,
not,
that was
all
also during the rise of the
voyeurism.
internet too.
and right.
All of
So
it's human nature.
Yeah.
All of that is voyeurism. Like Princess Di, one of the reasons you instinctively went to Princess Di was because the paparazzi is voyeuristic. The human nature, voyeuristic. So and I don't know if there's an answer to that, and I don't think we'll ever get to the point to where it's not. But we have to, with children, and I extend children to the age of 25 because your brain is finished developing around, allegedly, around 25. So I know some people running around here thinking they're adults at 18. Nah, boo, sit down. But we have to take our future and be relatively careful with it, whether they're in the public spotlight, because you can take this concept, the Britney concept, and put it down the street at your local elementary school.
Well, exactly. I had one of my kids would not dance with any boys at any middle school or high school dances because she said the other kids would take out their phones and they would take photos and then it would be a whole thing. So she actually hid in the bathroom, not because she was afraid of them, but she was just like, I don't want to be the source of your drama. And kudos to her, but it concerned me then too. Like, they can create the narrative for you. And I saw this even more with my other daughter a few years later. They create the narrative for you that you really can't do anything about. And just to kind of bring it back, I think that's what happened to Britney too, is like they created this narrative and then they just played off it and played off it and played off of it.
For clicks, yes, for clout. It goes back to the point of if people will do anything for clout. But within that industry, though, you have to remember that the social media, the paparazzi, they're not the only ones to blame, because the record labels and the management, they'll tell them, hey, paparazzi, hey, come to whatever Chicken Shack. Britney's about to come out and do this. Da, 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 da. So it was basically feeding into it because they knew that all publicity is, whether it's good or bad, is going to equate to sales, because at that point record sales were still a major centerpiece in order to make money.
And
So
then
this is all about the money
that
at the end of the
actually
day.
goes to the end to take that to its logical conclusion. You look past the paparazzi then because they're doing what we want them to do. So when do we, as and this is why I said, I like the public thinking with a little bit of shade.
Mm-hmm.
When do we, as humans, say we had to listen to a 14-year-old say, "Leave Britney alone," and nobody did it. I was guilty. I'm gonna be honest.
Same.
I was all up in it. I was
Same.
guilty. I was guilty. But in my older man mind, I can say, that 14-year-old kid was speaking the truth because he saw someone's humanity and not their celebrity, and they saw someone's humanity and not their popularity, and not the ability to make a buck. So and I think we are slowly, after the last administration, where just things got mean unnecessarily so, I think we as a society are starting to move to a place where we can say, all right, is this who we are? Is this the kind of people we want? Is this the kind of people we want to be? Is this the kind of world we want our children and our grandchildren to live in? Brittany is a product of that time, and she has lots of lessons to learn. Well, we have lots of lessons to learn from that.
I appreciate your optimism, but unfortunately, I have to disagree. While there is a certain segment of our population that is a little more evolved and feel like that is wrong for us to, bully or, be obnoxious with our access to celebrity. Unfortunately, there's another side of it. There is a growing population where because we do have to remember that race, that last presidential election was very close. He had 75 million votes. So there is a population that is okay with it and feel like, well, that's the job they signed up for. So they should be happy that because we're their customers. I mean, unfortunately, this is just the.
I think you misunderstood. I am not saying that there isn't a large contingency. I would say, as of right now, it is the majority. I wouldn't even say it is the minority. That is the majority.
Mm-hmm.
However, there is a faction, and you see a lot of it in Gen Zs. There is a faction that's saying this is not the way we want to be. And they are louder than they have ever been in any other generation. They are louder, they are stronger, and they're going to kick all of our behinds in a minute.
I told my youngest, I said, you guys are going to be our next civil rights generation. I mean, we're going through it right now. I mean, we're practically at it with, staring down the barrel, water cannons, things like that. I know we've moved on from that, but we're still kind of there. And they are the product that, I mean, just the way I hear my kids talk about things, and I've got a Gen Z cusper and then a full Gen Z, and they're jaded as hell. I'll tell you that. Like, they are sarcastic, morbid, crazy.
They're adult.
They remind me of Gen X.
Yeah.
They remind me of Gen X.
Yeah.
But I mean, we saw what happened with Gen X, though.
But here's the difference. But they don't remind me of Gen X at all. Gen X pretty much didn't care about anybody. They did their own thing. They cared about themselves, and then they did their own thing. This generation, they are quick to get out in the streets. Which is an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing to watch and to nurture.
Let me clarify. What I meant is that they have the similar type of humor. That's what I meant. But I love Gen Z.
Younger.
So so I want to do like one more mention before we go on to the take another commercial break and go to the main topic. So but thank you for this whole discussion on Brittany and like how it's like indicative of like our society right now. That there's so much more that it's so much more than just freeing Brittany from the conservatorship, because like we mentioned earlier, it can go back all the way to disability rights.
Absolutely.
And then how we consume media and consume the people that are part of it. So I really appreciate this conversation. So if you've been living under a rock, but the condo in Surfside, Florida, that had collapsed. They had just got a recent recount of those that have passed away, and it has gone up to 18. So the most recent two were children. So, prayers to the families that were affected by that incident, structural damage, and just heartache. So thoughts and prayers, and like legitimately thoughts and prayers for those people and for those families. There's something that is going to be a pretty big, that's not going to go away for a while. We're going to hear about Surfside condo for a good bit. And now the federal government is involved and planning on helping with the investigation. We're going to be hearing about the outcome of that for a good bit. That's my theory.
This is a complete failure from the bottom to the top, honestly.
Literally.
Yeah, literally. And they knew about these problems already. They did not advise the residents. As recently as 2 days before it collapsed, there were red flags going, this is a big problem. And I just read that the 2019 board of directors all quit because the repairs weren't being done fast enough. At any point along the way, I wonder, is there, clearly the information was there. Who didn't raise the red flag? And I don't want to blame anybody because I know they're feeling guilty right now, but that's 150 lives. That's immense amounts of damage. And they're expecting now that the rest of that tower may come down because there's strain on one of the other walls. And then you're thinking, well, what about all the other buildings in that area? There was another one right nearby by the same builder. This is critical, and they need to reassess everything and find all the failures along the way.
And I think the deal is they're not going to try to blame anyone just completely. I think they're going to focus on the cause, and then eventually they'll get to the blaming part. But right now, they're just trying to do some. They're still doing rescuing right now.
Right. Rescue, as always, may their memory always be a blessing to the families that lost unspeakable horrors. But it was very interesting watching all of this, because you saw that this was the first time really since 9/11 that there was one major building, and all you heard was, this does not happen in America, this does not happen in America, this does not happen in America. So it is a very humbling, all God's children. We Americans, we are really quick to say what won't happen in America, but it shouldn't happen anywhere. And I saw that when you said, Mo and I both shook our heads like they ain't sorry, because at the end of the day, it comes down to greed. They knew and how much a life costs.
Yeah.
And that's to me, if it a life is priceless. So if I have to throw everything I have at it to make it work, so be it. But that is not the way that American corporations function. That's not the way they run business.
The crazy part is the condo association was putting the burden of that cost back on the residents. The residents were each going to have to pay $80,000 to $300,000 to make these nominal and cosmetic changes. They were already taking out loans to do that. So, I mean, I'm going back to what you said, it is greed, but the price of that life, they deferred back onto the residents themselves. They weren't even willing to pay that price. Now they're going to have to pay probably, millions more in all of these lawsuits. But this comes back down to, we have an infrastructure problem in this country. We know that Florida is full of sinkholes because they built on marshes and they built on aquifers that when the fresh water drains out of Florida, when they drain out of other places with large aquifers, they cause sinkholes. And you have to know this about where you're living. And I think the majority of Americans have no idea what's under their feet or what could give. I mean, I'm sure you heard about over in Phoenix City, bunches of,
realtor.
yeah. Yeah, I know these things. But yeah, like bunches of sinkholes were just popping up all over the place. And it's because there's not a regular infrastructure inspection and people don't know what to look for in danger signs.
Yeah, and I believe there in one of the, I think it was the 2018 report that has been brought up multiple times throughout this whole thing, is that there was mention of like structural damage in like one particular part of the building, and it was like, I guess, like a pool and like an entrance, and like the fact that like no one thought to, or I guess they thought about it, but they didn't.
They were treating the symptoms. They said that they had to exchange basically sump pump motors every 2 years to continue the push of seawater coming through the walls back out. And that was, if you look at some of the pictures, it looked like the wall itself was buckling. But it did cause erosion and it did cause washout. And I heard a very unfortunate call from one of the residents to her spouse in DC. Her last words were, the pool is gone. Like it just fell out and then the line went dead. And that's it. That's all we know.
Yeah, that's disturbing.
Yeah.
You know, I've said this on this program before, and you know, I hope it pisses off more people. Black people in this country is the canary in the mine. And everybody knows what a canary is to a mine. If the canary passes out or die, that means you need to evacuate because there's some noxious gas that's going to kill you. We were saying these same things 15 years ago when Katrina happened and when those levees broke and the Fourth Ward was flooded, and they were screwed over by their insurance companies as well as the federal government, because the federal government was saying, hey, it was wind damage, while the insurance companies said, no, it's flood damage. So and there, to this day, 16 years ago, 16 years later, they haven't rebuilt those places. So that's also an area where it's below the sea level. They knew that there were issues in that area, but nobody did anything about that for decades. So now you have this issue now where it's an affluent area. They were a condo that was put on bad land. There's not any better way of describing it. That was some serious trash land that the contractor was trying to get a quick money grab on, and there's not going to be any consequences of it because the federal government is like, oh well, we're going to come in and we're going to help. So that means that contractor is going to get off scot-free and not go to prison, which is where
he
that
may be
contractor
long dead and buried with his money.
Right. And that's what they care about at the end of the day. So, I mean, while my hearts and prayers are definitely to those families because nobody deserves that, but African Americans, Black people have, we ringed an alarm for a reason. We don't do it just for ourselves. Well, some of us. But that's a whole nother show, trust me. So, but yeah.
Well, okay, so we're going to go into a quick commercial break, and then we're going to go talk about our main topic, critical race theory. And, ooh, Lord, let's get ready for it. All right.
Yeah, you like how I segue that, girl. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, we'll be back.
Oh, Lord.
Uh-oh. Commercial.
Yes.
So for the summertime, for your hot girl summer, if you haven't gotten your bundles yet, hit up Pretty in Pink bundles for all your beauty needs, because they have the hair oil, they got your your 30 inches, and you know, if you look good. I got my locks in, so I'm not looking for the bundles right now.
Look, you might want to, you might want to switch it up.
I might want to switch it up. I don't know. I'm not sure how I'm gonna do that, but this is fine.
Hey, anything's possible. But also in my T.S. Madison voice, if you're not rocking 30 inches, you ain't rocking shit, bitch. Y'all better get your hair. You better get your hair on. Get it together.
Look, hey, yes. So the way that this topic has been just taken over the news has blown my mind to where it makes me wonder, do you folks really understand what they're talking about?
No. There was a great article in one of the Alabama papers. I can send it to you if you want to.
Please
but they basically sat down and talked with the senator and was like, can you explain to us what you heard, where you heard it, this, that, and the other? He had no idea, cited some random thing he heard and could not provide a source.
Yeah. So the topic is critical race theory. So this one was important to me because as an educator, you know, Isaiah, you know this too. It has been in the news about multiple states banning critical race theory being taught in K-12 schools. Now, Mr. Isaiah teaches high school. I teach elementary school, and I've taught middle school. So in 8th grade, you learn about Georgia history. Mm-hmm. Not in one grade that I've ever taught, special education teacher, I've taught several grades, I have ever seen critical race theory mentioned in the school curriculum. It is not a standard. It is not in the curriculum. It's not in, we don't really have textbooks anymore for social studies. We have like online material. It's just but like the way that we've seen videos, particularly in Georgia, you know, our state school board has put out a statement about it. Some of your Metro Atlanta counties have had some seriously bad school board meetings. You know, was it Forsyth County? I know Cherokee County, Cobb County has had this conversation.
Shout out to Gwinnett County, though. Shout out to Gwinnett County because their chairman of the school board is a graduate of Harvard and also a Black man, and he made some very eloquent statements when it came to talking about critical race theory. So it just shows the vastness of who's educated and who isn't educated, because all of the detractors, not one of them can actually explain what critical race theory is. Not a single one. And the sad part is it's a graduate level course that's dealing with like people that become lawyers, or if they're going for their master's in criminology, doing public policy. So, you know, like the average person is not doing that. So like, this is just something that the right has come up with to talk about because I guess they were bored.
So
before
let's give a quick definition. So it is a practice of interrogating the role of race and racism in society that emerged in the legal academy and spread to other fields of scholarship. So we are talking about, yes, it started off in the legal field, legal scholars. This is where it's beginning. So we're not talking about, you know, your undergraduate philosophy course. We're talking about your graduate level, law school level thought process. And you can take these things because it is talking about a society influence, and it goes into these other levels of scholarship, such as education and the medical field. But we're the basis of this is legal. is legal.
Mm-hmm. So what has happened is people have confused CRT, critical race theory, and critical theory. We do teach critical theory in secondary education. So if you go all the way back to, I'm probably in trouble for saying this, but Marx, like you're going to see what critical theory is the study of any subject area through a social construct. So you can, like, there's feminist theory, there's queer theory, you can have like Southern theory, Southern Gothic could be considered critical theory, because
Right.
it is like one of the things that I do with my kids when I get them to start thinking about history, text, and plays, etc., and human experience. I have them draw these glasses. I have these glasses that come out, and I say, okay, now write everything that you are, and these are the lenses in which you look at something. Like, you look at this through a very specific lens. Now, there are going to be times where I'm going to ask you, pass the glasses, to look at something through someone else's lens. Like, we teach children to do this. We have sayings. You can't judge a man until you walk a mile in his shoes. That's critical theory. Now, when
how someone else wants to be treated.
Yes. When we say critical race theory, what we are, and I would argue that there are some secondary schools, AP classes, where critical race theory is taught to an extent. Like, you know how there's multiple ways to explain gravity? You can explain it to a 5-year-old, but you can also talk about it, with their PhD in physics.
Right. Same thing with sex education.
So, yeah, so we talk about critical race theory in a way that says, okay, now if we look at this particular work, let's see, I have a new book right here. Oh, I'll pull it up. This is what I'm a big Richard Wright fan. I don't know if any of you are Richard Wright fans. The Man Who Lived Underneath the Ground. It's a new release of one of his older books. We can look at it, written in 42, with critical, what laws were in place. We teach To Kill a Mockingbird, which is a story read in 9th grade about the law. We teach it there. What people are confusing is, people don't want to feel bad. 2, people don't want Mima. They're like, Mima's in heaven now, but Mima was a hell of a racist. How do we justify or rectify that in our minds?
Reconcile it, yes.
Products of their time. So, because we have grown into such an anti-intellectual society, in like the last less 4 or 5 years, we've been extraordinarily intellectual. We tell that's not the boat that I write. We people jump the gun. They jump the gun and they're immediately thinking, you're trying to make all white people feel bad. You're trying to make all colonialism. Stop saying colonialism. No.
Stop calling folks colonizers. That's the big thing right now.
Oh my God, that is my favorite. I love it.
Well, it's like, John, I'm not calling you a colonizer because you didn't colonize shit. But I will call your great grandma or your great grandma, because that's what they did. And they brought those Western European ideals not only to Africa, pretty much destroying the continent.
Yeah.
But they brought it to America, they brought it to South America, and how we in the 21st century live in that paradigm has to be discussed.
So
at different levels.
And also even with the Native American population. And the other indigenous tribes that were also affected, dealing with that. And there's a TikToker by the name of Modern Warrior. He's Native American, and that's basically his favorite phrase, because and it's the sad part about it is that they prove his point every single time, because they get so upset about being called a colonizer, and he says, colonizer, and he reiterates like the issues that you're having, because okay, people aren't necessarily colonizing lands, at least not in the U.S. as much. However, they're colonizing in various ways, such as culture. If you look at the whole additive dealing with cultural appropriation. That's within itself. You don't have to have a lot of money to do that, apparently, and apparently that is still popular, and you make a lot of money from it. So I mean, it is what it is.
I would love to throw my 2 cents in as a white person, because this is something that we I'm the only white people in my house right now. Everybody else is different. And I mean, it's been a journey for me. And speaking to the point that you said, there's no toolbox for white people, like, because history, I mean, and this is along the lines of critical race theory, so many of us are never challenged to it. It's never defined what white means, what it does. And oftentimes when we do have to define it by history, it is uncomfortable for so many of them. I still remember in my intercultural communication class, I knew it was going to be challenging my perspective of race and what it meant in America, but the teacher had us read, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting at the Cafeteria Table Together? And I thought I was open-minded at this point because I was an adult. I had, I had bought into those lies that they taught me that, yeah, racism still exists, but it's over there. It's a few bad people. It wasn't until I started really digesting that book that I realized the level of systemization. But that book opens saying, if you're white, you're a racist. And I went, what? Like, what am I getting myself into? And when she explains that as a white individual benefiting from a system of racism makes me racist. And then you go on to read, gosh, I cannot remember his name right now. He's put out a lot of books recently where he says you can be a racist, you can be a segregationist, or you can be anti-racist. So really, we start this process. I started this process realizing that I am racist, regardless of what my prejudices are. But I have grown into someone who pursues anti-racism. But I feel still very isolated and like a special case because, again, they don't give you a toolbox and they don't teach you how to mediate those feelings. So that's really just for anybody out there who's listening at wondering about that perspective. I definitely don't want to step on y'all's toes, but it's been an interesting process learning through that lens, kind of what you were saying earlier.
So that brings up a point, like what you just mentioned, the idea of that, like, racism is really just the few people that are just super duper mean, which is actually, that's one of the tenets of critical race theory. It's just the rejection of this idea that, like, it's just a few bad apples. It is a social construct, so therefore it is very much embedded into our society. Therefore, it's embedded into our laws and it's embedded into our policies. And the fact that it's actually quite normal. It's not this random phenomena that, we kind of have to get over this idea of, like, well, you think of the racism from the documentaries from the civil rights movement, and, like, that's your only like, real, like, connection to it, therefore it feels so far removed. No, it's evolved because it's so normal and it's so embedded into our society that this is
it was like, only normal. In the last couple of years that the National Association of Realtors offered an official policy or official apology for their previous policy on redlining and segregating neighborhoods. That's huge. That's one. I think it's wonderful that they did that, and I respect the organization. But it was getting into my career going, my job is to help people build equity. And then looking back in time, and there's some great documentaries out there.
But The Color Law is a good book to talk about that redlining.
Yeah, but we just did not allow that equity to ever be built.
Mo.
Here's my thing. See, I have to slightly disagree.
Okay.
That apology, it was cute. But it, unfortunately, without any actual, when you apologize to someone and you don't do anything to rectify the situation, it's basically a waste of breath and a waste of a sheet of paper.
Right. So there's a phrase for that. There's a phrase for that. Apology without action is just manipulation.
And that's exactly what's going on. Because if you remember, Bill Clinton apologized for slavery during his presidency. And that was the first time, that was done towards African Americans. However, within the last, 20 years since he's been out of office, what has been done in order to rectify the situation of our ancestors being enslaved in this country for over 400 years? I mean, we're
And
at a
think
point
about
now
Hillary
that we
Clinton
can't even
too.
teach it. Right. I mean, we're at a point now that
Yeah.
we can't even teach it in our schools because we don't want mainstream, i.e., Caucasians, to be upset about their history. So until and this is coming from a place where before I became, went into my career of trucking. I worked in banking. I worked under the credit card industry. And unfortunately, those that rule of redlining, while that became outlawed, it's still being used to this day because they recognize that people are more segregated now than they were 50 years ago, and they
Mm-hmm.
basically go by your zip code to in order to give you your credit score, also your insurance, because if you're in a zip
Mm-hmm.
code that is it's a little sketchy, your rates go up. So basically, we have this. We should call it a black penalty tax
Mm.
because that's what it is. But you know how we call it? We talk
The
about the
pink.
pink
Yeah.
tax.
Mm-hmm.
We should call it a
Yeah.
black tax because it's more expensive to be black. As far as those aspects I've talked about, housing, food, and also you get subpar food, so you pay more money out. And to top it off, you don't even make as much as your Caucasian counterparts. So it's while I'm good that they give that little sheet of paper, I would like some action. I would like some training done, free classes. I would like some actual programs where they try to put African Americans in within some various communities, due to the fact that we know as well, 10%. Anything over 10% for of a community that has African Americans in it, the property value goes down, or at least that's the
Mm-hmm.
myth that's been propelled.
Mm-hmm.
That has to be that. So there's been propaganda to prop this up. There needs to be propaganda to break this down and
Mm-hmm.
reform it in order to make this country a more perfect union. Okay, that should have been my final thought, but I just had to get that out.
But
Come on now.
so
Yes.
so the thing is though is that it when we come, so we're going to bring it back to the schools. um Learning about history and learning about these different policies. The thing is, like, these policies, this history, these facts, they're not actually hidden. There are plenty of primary sources where you can find this information. It's just no one thinks to look for those things. So it's the idea of that, like, it's so far fetched that this couldn't be real. This is false. This is fake news. No, man. Go to your archives at your local library.
Well, you again, and I think Mo mentioned it earlier. And the biggest thing the worst thing that ever happened to the American education system was the Daughters of the Confederacy.
Yes.
Yes.
The worst
Oh God.
You want me to
that
break
ever
out the book?
there is, like, we have monument too. Yes, Daughters of the American Confederacy. So, like, when you say it's not hidden, I argue and say yes, it is, because they did such a good job hiding it. And most
Hide it in
people
plain
who
sight.
are, yeah, it's like hiding in plain sight. And a lot of teachers teach what they were taught. Like, we have Gen Zs going around here saying that the Civil War was about states' rights.
Which it was, but the states' rights was slavery.
It was about slavery.
But you could also
Right.
find in primary sources if you were to look at the documents for the secessions for each of those states.
Yep.
Jefferson
Yes, it's all
Davis
about
said it.
slavery.
The president of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis, stated it in his manifesto when they were seceding from the Union.
Right. Abraham Lincoln said it in the Emancipation Proclamation. Yo, slave states, if you are not rebelling, you get to keep your slaves. Otherwise, they free. Like, Abraham Lincoln freaking said, states, if you stay in here, you can keep your slaves.
And I think that's the biggest
Looking
thing.
at you.
But again,
that's
I'm sorry.
no, go ahead, Mo, because I'll come in after you.
Okay, but then again, that's a case of the only reason why that we were freed was due to being a pawn in our country's war within the Civil War. We were pawns because with the Emancipation Proclamation, it was only affected those states that were a part of the Confederacy that succeeded, because there were states that were not succeeded from the
Those
Union, and they
border
were still
states.
allowed to have the border states were still allowed to have their slaves that were still a part of the Union. Right.
Maryland.
Right. So we actually didn't. Well, I'm sorry. our ancestors didn't get free until 1865 with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. So, and
13
I always
free.
say you're right, because technically we're, as a country, slavery still exists. 13th Amendment, if you're in prison, you're still a slave. So with that being stated, that I'm tired of being used either as a pawn or basically being used as a form of being oppressed in order to give somebody else ill-gotten gains.
So I like 100% on that note, I want to read you a sentence from this book, and you can't read it on camera, but I told everybody about it earlier. This is called City of Progress, A History of Columbus, Georgia, 1828 to 1978. And it's important because I've also seen this book quoted in more modern literature, even though, let me find this page. This came out, it was like sometime in the 50s, I think. I got to go back and find that date. But I've seen this book quoted from a lot. Yeah.
So for those of you that are listening, for those of you that are watching, Columbus, Georgia is where at least the three of us are located, and it is a little further south. Bible Belt. Yes. Jabama. Yes, we are Jabama. And this particular town is your epitome of the good old boy home with many of well-to-do families that take with that what you will. Just saying, that's just some context. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And significantly historically second biggest city in the state of Georgia, and so some founding things happen here. But this is where we get into the founding things from this book. This is only on page 5, not including the index.
God.
Early history of the Georgia colony. Despite Oglethorpe's success with the Indians, the new colony of Georgia did not prosper during the first few decades for a number of reasons. The trustees had strictly forbidden hard liquor and slavery, thereby hoping to improve human nature, and had also established restrictive land tenure laws. All 3 of these restrictions were both impractical and unpopular. So
in other words, they were saying that, they wanted their liquor and they wanted their slaves in order to work that land.
Yep. So I don't know how to lay it out anymore for you. Oh, and it's so full of gems. It is the cringiest read. And it is.
Look, I'm going to be with Mo on this. I can't
you should make a TikTok.
Just doing the different
that'd be so good, Hannah. Just do an excerpt a couple days a week.
Right. Just do a TikTok. Yeah.
Y'all, I will think about it.
Didn't you say it was published in 1978, right?
The one page said 78, but then it said 65, so I couldn't find the date, the exact date.
Yikes.
And also, let's not forget that the Daughters of the Confederacy were the main reason why those Confederate statues are erected around the South. Due to and this happened between the 1890s all the way up to the 1940s.
Yeah.
So basically, so we have treasonous people that have statues. Some of them are terrible, but some of them were terrible as far as like the likeness of the person. But the crazy part about it is that people have this mindset of, oh, well, they just put that up like right after the Civil War. It has nothing to do with racism or slavery. No, that was a message to the Black people, letting them know that, hey, we still run this. You may not be technically slaves, but we're over you, okay?
So what I was thinking earlier, it kind of just came upon me, which it should make sense, but like the issue is American exceptionalism. If you dig into this, if we talk about this, like we should be talking about this, if we are teaching the children, like we should be teaching the children, American exceptionalism is a done deal. Like that the fact that we have to really think critically about our history and our society you can't uphold American exceptionalism. And that's been one of the biggest arguments that I've seen. But American exceptionalism is also talking about white supremacy, because it's not talking about the others of America. It is talking about it's talking about whiteness in America.
American exceptionalism is very specifically American whiteness.
Mm-hmm.
Like when we say like whiteness, we are a Western culture going all the way back to ancient Greek, aka whiteness. What we are taught is we are not taught about the Orshas. We are not taught about Zulu tribes. We are not taught any of that. We are taught Western society. And not to show my little geekness, but essentially Western European culture is like the Borg. You assimilate or you're destroyed. Like it is the Borg, and you can't just pop in and out. Like,
I think
I was like, that's where we get things like respectability politics.
Yes.
And and speaking as someone who has done and benefited from respectability politics, which is tokenism. And you don't really realize it when you're in it because it's survival.
Yes.
And that's where it's like, you are going to survive. You are taught to survive. And sometimes that means stepping on your own. That's where we get that crabs in a barrel syndrome. Like when you said you were raised this girl, don't worry, there's enough of this that is true. We have to get to a point, also bringing it back to critical race theory, we have to get to a point to where we can discuss in a space that people are willing to listen. Mm-hmm. You don't want me to call you a colonizer? Don't worry about it, John. I won't. Let me not say John in case my friend says, I got my name. I was like, Joel, that's my thing. It's like, don't worry about it, Joel. Like, but I do want to talk to you in a space that you will hear me. I want you, it's like, this is the issue. This isn't your issue, but this is our issue that we have to move, not only as humanity, but really because we still have to deal with all of that baggage that Europe gave us. And keep in mind, they did not send their best and their brightest over here.
They really didn't. They did not.
Georgia was a prison state.
Yes, they did not. It's like, oh look, he's straight from Cambridge. We should send them to the Americas. No, they didn't do that.
Oh Lord, that's a whole nother show.
Yeah, but that's when we start talking about critical race theory in and out of academia, because that's what happened. It has left academia and has reached the masses. And as part of an educator, we teach white middle class morality. That is like, if you are not behaving in such a manner that is appropriate in the white middle class, not lower class. If you can do upper class, great. You're going to be penalized. And there's going to be think about it. Referrals, disciplines, such and such was being too. These are laws. These are laws that are already ingraining in youth of people, BIPOC people, like, the way you are, your culture is not accepted. So, dress anyone gets out as a board, it's fine. Like, they're like, or if it's the healthier person who is, as I say, blessed, and they're yanked out and blown into ISS for dress code violation. These are laws. That's what critical race theory is when you break it down. Like, you're saying, oh, how are we going to address these social inequities so we can all, as they say, we can all walk together hand in hand to God. So, yeah, with all of that, we got to deal with the European weight. It's like someone just loads our book bag, right? And it's like, oh, we have like first weight, all of Europe, because you literally have to know it from ancient Greek to present. Second weight, all of like American history. Third
Mm-hmm.
wave, all of the American history that they're not going to teach you. And you have to have
Mm.
that double consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I
And
think that
America is just learning to be double conscious.
I think that's why I had my biggest problem with critical race theory is we're barely teaching real history as it is, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I mentioned to Rakia that I found a piece of personal history that kind of blew my mind and really kind of opens this up as far as like the extent to which critical race theory can go. I found out that in 1918, my great aunt in Kansas of German heritage was forced to sign alien enemy paperwork because they were concerned at the time that all World War One soldier or Germans during World War can't speak anymore during World War One would be traitors and would be spying on America. So I mean that's again I remember being taught in history that oh yeah there was a time we didn't like Irish, we didn't like Italian, we didn't like this, and none of that is systematized in the way that racism is. But I can't even learn about my own culture and what we're going through in those yucky parts. So, I mean, I remember a paragraph in my textbook about the Japanese internment camps. I tell you, you got to go watch Allegiance with George Takei. It's mind blowing, just what's left out, and then just you have to go dig for the history of America's enslaved because they literally buried it because they didn't want to talk about it. And it's infuriating to me as someone who wants to know things and understand things that this is something that we don't have access to unless you know where to go look and unless you've got some access to some sources. So critical race theory, my keister, like it's not being taught. So what do you need to legislate?
They were jumping the gun because they had already killed they already going after the project 1619 the 1619 project.
Yeah.
So they were like, okay, well, who whom else we can use in order to distract from what's really going on. Critical race theory, let's do it. Because that's actually talking about the systems, because we have to remember that the system is basically what has built this country in the past 200 some odd years and even before that. That system has made them profit. So if you start talking about it, that means there's going to be a chance that that system is going to get broken down. And if it gets broken down, that means they're not going to get paid. So if they're not going to get paid, they're not going to be happy. So we're going to do anything that we can in order to bring that to a halt. Because while you're right, there was a paragraph because it was a situation that happened like 4 years, and even briefly with Germans in 1918. At the very least, I know for Asian people, they were compensated. As their descendants as well were compensated as a form of reparations. Unfortunately, we've been African Americans have been here over 400 years, and there hasn't been any form of retribution, any type of. We've basically been given talk, and at this point, talk is cheap. And there has to be some type of means in order to bring this to the forefront and actually come to some type of resolution. Because otherwise, if we don't, it's going to continue. And one last thing before I shut up for a minute. What I love, which I think it goes back to your point earlier, Isaiah, about how this generation is much different on how they do things. I love TikTok because they were like, you know what? You don't want to do critical race theory. You don't want to teach it in your schools. That's fine. We'll teach it on this platform. We will have classes that is free. We got people that, that are, have doctorates in this. And, we have lives and we're just going to go over the book, from front to cover. And we're just going to go over this information because I guess the civil rights movement, the Black Panther Party said that the revolution will not be televised. You're right, it won't be televised. It'll be posted on social media. How you doing?
Right. So I think we've discussed this a little bit, but why has this become such a political issue? Why is this being used as the money, yes, distraction, because this is a distraction for sure. But I've seen how people have gotten so riled up over this, and in a way that I guess it shouldn't surprise me. With it's on a running loop on certain channels. Talk about this and how it's going to do this. It's going to make your white child feel bad. It's going to make your child feel bad about being American. It's going to do this, and that, and it's almost like what's the word? McCarthyism in a way. That's and it just or maybe not propaganda. Yes,
it's propaganda. That's what it is basically.
Like it's almost like a Red Scare. It's gonna be Red Scare.
What I find interesting is that Germany, for example, with their atrocities that they did, they took an opposite approach. They said, you know what, we're going to focus on telling the truth. We're going to outlaw any dealings with Nazis, and we're going to have actual education on what it meant and what happened and who did what, and also even with within the Jewish communities. Like there are several places even in this country where you can go to the Holocaust Museum and learn about what happened. And on top of that, you have the African American museums in various cities, including in DC, which was recently erected. Unfortunately, there's a segment of this population that is easily swayed. And it goes back to what Lyndon B. Johnson said, which I'm paraphrasing, that the white man will give you the shirt off his back in order for him to feel superior to the Negro.
Well, you could literally take his money out of his back pocket if you can make him feel like he's superior to the black man.
Yeah, and LBJ was prejudiced all get out, but he was it was truth within those statements.
True. The political issue comes down to, in all honesty, simplistically, anti-intellectualism. Those are the people who are pushing this because people do not want to do the work of studying. That is work. Change. Nobody likes change because change says that I am going to have to do better. Like change says that I am. It's like it's that kid at a baptism that's like, oh, it's coming, the water, and then they don't want to get wet, but it's only through that wetness, that baptism. I'm really into religion stuff, by the way. Like only through that baptism that you are made clean. So people don't want to do the work, which also, and this is a whole conversation for another day, American evangelicalism. Because American evangelicalism brings us God and country. It also brings us a God in which we don't have to work. That's what, like, I love Israel and all of the other things. I am a friend of God. But when you look at that song, it's like, who am I to do? I was like, you skipped the whole point that Abraham had to be willing to sacrifice Isaac. Like you skipped the whole thing that Jesus said to love. So it's very I-centric. American evangelicalism is another reason why this is a political issue, because they have not done the work in their faith. And if they have not done the work in their faith, if they're going to wave that flag that says God and country, how are they supposed to do the work in our society?
I had to push back just a little bit. I had a little pushback on that because evangelicalism, they're taught, but they're taught incorrectly. And on top of that, it's still rooted in white supremacy because they use religion. I'm sorry, what?
You get no argument from me. You were right.
Oh,
That's
okay.
not pushback,
They,
girl. Keep going. Keep going.
religion was the tool that white supremacists used in order to oppress people in this country. They used it to
Mhm.
justify slavery. They used it to justify
Oppress. Just
the
oppress, not
slaughtering of
discriminate.
Native Americans.
Mhm.
Right. Well, I'm just
Oppress.
saying.
Because they use period, not just this country.
Right. Well, I'm just saying
There's
in
no
the
pushback.
case of right. Because you're right, because it did start with the Dutch with the letter that they sent in order to start in Africa. Then they came over here, with Christopher Columbus and Americas. It's just it's just a
Everybody has
just a
that
shit
picture of
show.
Michelangelo's out of work cousin up on their wall. I'm sorry, that's Michelangelo's out of work cousin.
See, I
And
mean they took it literally when they said let us make him in his image. And they were like,
Yeah.
well, the image is me, so that means they must have looked like me.
Hmm.
And that's the model.
Mm,
But yeah, but all of that is, but because people won't be willing to do that work, and there are some churches that are starting to do the work, right?
right.
And there are pushes for that, but until your majority, not just progressives, but till the conservative faction or the more traditional churches start saying, okay, we need to go back and do this work, they're going to push back against critical race theory. And that is religion is political.
Hmm.
Abortion, social work,
Hmm.
welfare, all of that. That's what people vote on. They vote their emotions. So
And I
But
haven't
even
heard
within
an.
that, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Because I'm gonna be a broken record about the white supremacy thing. So you go ahead,
Well,
honey.
I was going to say that one thing I didn't hear specifically was scarcity thinking. It's the idea that if we go back and bring everybody up, that somebody's going to lose. And it tends to be a conservative mindset also, which greatens that rift. A democratic thinking person, a progressive person is going to go say, you know what, if we feed all these people and we get them in houses, they build their equity. And a conservative minded person may say something to the effect of, if they get a handout, they'll learn never to work and we'll just keep feeding them forever. But they've done studies, and the truth is, if you can help out in productive ways and provide the right models and provide the right opportunities, you do lead people out of poverty. You raise your community value, you raise education levels. It brings everybody up across the board. So as long as we continue thinking in a scarcity mindset, that if we, oh gosh, if we go learn about our awful history and start making things really truly equitable, then so and so is going to lose out, or I'm going to lose out, then we're never going to get there.
because the idea is that there's this person in power, there's this group in power, and they do anything to help level the playing field. They're supposedly losing. They're supposedly
Losing their
not.
status.
They're losing their status, they're losing their
Hmm.
power, and therefore they're at the same level that those people were at the beginning, when it should not be seen that way.
Mhm.
Because we know
But
that, the least of these, that phrase.
Mhm.
once again, I'm gonna go ahead and say it because I called it. It's still rooted in white supremacy. Oh,
Yes.
Yeah.
what you're talking about,
Yeah.
Hannah? Because because you have to remember with those reforms that happened, with various welfare programs that was started during FDR's time when the Great Depression happened and
Mhm.
everybody was broke. Those programs were. Even though they were for everyone, they were only white people mainly had access until black people basically were protesting, were showing
Mhm.
their grievances about that, and then eventually it trickled down to black people. So fast forward to the late '70s, you have Ronald Reagan when he's on his this bullpit in order to become president. He started telling the story of the welfare queen, where it's
Yeah.
basically this case of this black woman who was basically basically she identified herself white on her census, but she was a passing black person
Mhm.
that looked light skinned, so she looked white. Anyway, side the point. Point of it is that they basically put the other as Black people, people that look like me, that they shouldn't have access to welfare. They should go out and work, even though it seems like that when Black people don't want to work, that's when we become lazy. But that's a whole nother story within that.
And if you look back in history, there are things to help prevent that. So, when because let's keep in mind though, the biggest issues that come up with the socialism, with welfare, affirmative action, the biggest recipients of those policies, of those things are not the stereotype of that the propaganda, the Black person in poverty. We all know who the biggest recipient of welfare is. It's probably a white person in Kentucky.
No, white people are statistically less than 30% of African Americans are any type of excuse me, I'm sorry, let me get that right. 30% of this country is it has some type of recipient of public assistance in this country,
right?
And Black people are under, I believe the figure was, it's under 30% as well, 30 to 35%. So clearly it's not us, because we're only 13% of the population. The point of it is that if you look at the propaganda going all the way down to the political ads that were being put out, with the exception of, I believe, 1983, the majority of those ads were Black people that were showing in negative lights of being in poverty, on public assistance, that they need to, pick themselves up by the bootstraps. And the only reason why 1983 was such a significant year is because I believe that was the year that was there was a economic downturn, so they needed the public assistance. So they were like, okay, well, let's normalize it in order for people to be okay for people to be on it temporarily. Hence my point why I have such an issue with respectability. Exactly. And hence my point why I have such a deep-seated issue with respectability politics. And that even goes within critical race theory, with the dissonance of it, because there is also a population of Black people that feel like that, oh, well, we shouldn't be talking about it either. Honey, they will not respect you regardless of how much that you kiss their hiney, okay? It's just not going to happen. Regardless if you don't have a bonnet on, you can have a three-piece suit on. They do not care. Period. So we need to get over that, okay? And then just be who we are and learn about who we, where we came from. Okay, I'm done.
and then going back to American exceptionalism, and this whole idea of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, I think it's been popping up recently, but with all these so-called benefits that are supposed to have received as being American, going back to the military, World War II, and the benefit of
Black soldiers did not receive.
Right. Right. Thank you. GI Bill. Help with finding housing, buying housing, being able to be homeowners. Those things that that are considered benefits that they will advertise as being part of the military, and you literally exclude an entire demographic from being able to benefit from that. And you're telling me that I need to pull myself up by my bootstraps, where I'm considered part of that demographic that you're trying to hold back. Tell me how that makes sense.
Martin Luther King even talked about it in one of his interviews, and I love that how they like to talk about. Well, Martin Luther King wouldn't like this. Yes, he would. He would be on the first platform he could find to say we need to talk about this.
He wasn't killed about integration. He was killed about poverty reform. That was why he was killed. He was. Let's talk about that though. Like the way that we view history. It's all coming back to history. The way that we understand Martin Luther King. The writings are there. We can go beyond I have a dream speech.
The interviews were there. Yes,
we can do the interviews. We can talk about COINTELPRO. We can talk about letter from Birmingham. Where's Birmingham or Montgomery?
No, letter from Birmingham.
Birmingham.
That was Birmingham.
Yeah, and the fact that it wasn't integration that got him killed. It was the work that he was doing to prevent or lower poverty and that not only would affect and benefit the poor blacks, but also the poor whites.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was one of the main issues that they had with the Black Panther Party too, because they were able to connect with other marginalized groups that would change the status quo.
Yes, because there was a speech that Huey P. Newton had made, I believe, in 1971, where he affirmed the gay rights movement as well as the women's movement.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And
so it was the intersectionality of it all.
Yes.
Yeah, PJ is going to kill me because I can't remember her name, but the Japanese activist who actually stood with Malcolm X and brought the Asian American community into the fold. They said, until we can get you your freedom, your rights, we won't have a chance to have any. And I really am going to get in trouble for not remembering her name.
It's okay.
Well, I guess that's been proven wrong in 2021, and not to be disrespectful to that history, but because they, AAPI did get the Asian Rights Bill passed. We've yet to get the George Floyd bill passed, as well as the John Lewis Voting Rights Act passed.
But we got Juneteenth, Mo. We got Juneteenth.
But mind you, here's the thing. That had been up for a bill since 1968.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So it was kind of like, okay, well, we're not going to give you anything in order to change the system. But how about this here? Perfect analogy. You go to a restaurant, you order a nice soup. You get all the little, they're like, I need a spoon. Oh, okay, well, let me give you some salt and pepper, in order to enhance the flavor.
Mm-hmm.
But I need a spoon. Oh, well, let me get you some crackers in order to help you enhance the flavor of the meal. But I need a spoon. Well, you have silverware right there. It's a fork. I need a spoon. Mm-hmm. We need a spoon, people. We need a spoon. So it's cute that we also need those other things in order to make the meal come together. But we still need this damn spoon.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. For some reason right now. So side note, because someone's, lighting up fireworks outside my window. Look.
Are we already at the point?
Because it's
July weekend.
Right. It's July 1st. It's Jabama.
Mm-hmm.
It's July 1st. Those things will not go away till July 14th. I promise you. At least.
Also, let me quickly say that I stand with our indigenous peoples of the Americas. They've asked Canadians not to celebrate Canada Day, which is today. So I've not worn any orange at all. I've not worn any of their colors. I haven't looked at your do, none of that good stuff. And also for 4th of July, they're asking us to wear orange as a form of solidarity.
And just to elaborate on that, that's because they're finally having their history opened up to the mass kidnapping and murder of Indigenous children that were taken from their homes back in, I don't remember the years, but it's pretty horrible.
So
hundreds of bodies are being found.
So strange
I can only
thing.
cringe.
So strange thing. The first time that I learned about those schools, I did a small stint of grad school, and it was talking about like the history of higher education. And it was briefly mentioned the residential schools about how they were taken from their home. The children were taken from their homes, were told to assimilate, and then sent back. Some of them were sent back to their homes, and then because they were so assimilated, they couldn't fit into their home people anymore. And then, strangely enough, a few years ago, if you ever saw the show Anne with the E, based off of Anne of Green Gables, there's actually like a storyline, yes, about because it's based in Canada. Yes, strangely, but it was very good. It was very well done. But I was very shocked that it would even talk about that. But it talks about a very young Indigenous girl that Anne had become friends with, and because the townspeople were so scared of the Indigenous folks that weren't bothering them, they were doing their thing, they were living their life. They
minding their business.
They were minding their business. They took this child they forced them to. They took the child. They manipulated the families to take those children. That's what that's what they did. They manipulated those families and took those children, cut their hair, would not let them speak their language, practically tortured them.
No, not practical, actual.
Right, tortured them. And, of course, this child was able to escape, but just the thought that was something that someone thought that this was the right thing to do, and the fact that you entrust all these people to enact all this, enact your will. And so, like, right now, like, the biggest thing right now is that not only is just like the Canadian government, but like the Catholic Church has a hand in this, because so many of the schools, the Catholic Church had a hand in a good majority of the schools that were built.
Hell, slavery.
Yeah.
Once again, it's going back to what? White supremacy.
We should make a theme song for that. I don't know. A little theme, a meme, a gif.
Yes, please do. Of me doing this, and I'm saying white supremacy, and you put it in text. White supremacy.
It's got to be in there. We don't want to do it in a rainbow, but something sparkly.
You make your W.
Spirit hands, spirit fingers.
Yeah. I'd like a unicorn just fly across.
Yes. Let me put my my skills to work. I don't have to do that. Okay, so I think we got to the point where we can do one more commercial break and head into our final thoughts, and then I'm gonna let these people go because it's time for bed, honestly. Just so y'all know.
Bonnet time.
Yes.
Bonnet time. So give us a quick break and we'll be right back.
Yeah, that's why I didn't get to watch the movie, because I went to watch it today and they.
Oh, what is up with these commercials? These commercials have been like messing with me. Here we go. Let's try this again.
Yeah, that's why I didn't get to watch the movie, because I went to watch it today and they took it off HBO Max.
Right.
What is that about?
It's crazy because you know what's funny? The universe is teasing me because I got HBO Max specifically to watch Wonder Woman 84. Specifically to watch Wonder Woman 84. And then when I finally sat down to watch it, it wasn't on HBO Max. So today when I go to see whether Mortal Kombat is on there, Mortal Kombat is not there, but guess what's now back on HBO?
I was about to say, because it's on there.
Now Wonder Woman 84, the universe is like...
That is from our sister podcast, Geeking Out. We're a bunch of, we're not really that random anymore. It's a group of us that talk about randomly geeky things. So last week we talked about the Lego movies. It was a good little time because, everything is awesome. And,
awesome!
Right. And then next week, I believe Julian is hosting, and he wanted us to talk about disco.
Oh,
he wants to talk about disco.
Really?
Yeah.
Like the era of music?
Yeah.
Can I be on there? Even though I was on the Lego Batman movie?
Why not? Yeah.
We can talk about my favorite disco artist, Sylvester. You make me feel mighty real. So exciting.
Because funny thing enough, like I want to talk about the little clip of like Pharrell and Dave Grohl from Foo Fighters and Nirvana talking about how like his biggest
style.
Influence for the style for the Nirvana album was the Gap Band.
The Gap Band. Yes.
Yes. I want to talk about that. Right.
Before he goes in.
It smells like Teen Spirit.
Teen Spirit. Yes.
Yes. So, we gotta talk about that. But okay,
yes, we do. Ooh,
this is the part of the final thoughts, part of the show, the end, where each panelist kind of gives their final thoughts, their overall take of the episode, whether it's current events or our main topic. And we can start because I know Mo looks to go last or second to last. We're gonna start with Hannah.
Oh, okay. So I didn't get a chance to share with y'all earlier, but I told you I had pulled up the wording in that Georgia resolution bill from the Georgia State Education Board. And this is really what set me off with CRT. I mean, it just blew my mind. So I'll read it first and then I'll tell you my thoughts about it. Concepts that impute fault, blame, a tendency to oppress others, or the need to feel guilt or anguish to persons solely because of their race or sex violate the premises of individual rights, equal opportunity, and individual merit underpinning our constitutional republic, and therefore have no place in training for teachers, administrators, or other employees of the public education system of the state of Georgia. And I read that and I said, y'all can't teach anything anymore then. Like, you can't, no science. I'm sorry, there's no science. We can't talk about any of our female colleague scientists because they've been oppressed. We can't read books. Books are gone. All the books I grew up with, all the ones I loved, Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, Number the Stars, To Kill a Mockingbird, as you mentioned earlier, gone, can't study them. No history. I mean, what is history except the conversation about who's oppressing who? And like, you know, the wording in this thing is a landmine. And at any point in time, a smart enough child, and damn, they're smart now, is going to pull this as a test case against this ridiculous wording. This is truly a smoke and mirrors game to keep people at each other's throats. That does not improve education and does not help our kids at all. They need honesty. They demand it from us, and it's time we start teaching it.
All right. Well, thank you, Hannah. All right, Isaiah, final thoughts.
Oh, well, she got a lot of things. Well, basically, final thoughts, tying in critical race theory, Britney Spears, and everything. Be nice. Mm-hmm. Don't be afraid of your history. Don't be afraid to learn. And when you know, as Mama would say, and everybody's grandmama, when you know better, do better. Mm-hmm. Ain't no shame in saying you're wrong. And that's, if we can just get to that simple place, oh, well, we might as well be walking into glory. So, yeah, those are my final thoughts. Be nice, mm-hmm. and don't be afraid to say you're wrong.
All right, Mo.
I'm going to be the broken record again. This is all rooted in white supremacy. White supremacy. In order to maintain this system of oppression with white supremacy, because they know their time is up. They know that the information is being pushed. So much information is being put out there. The truth is being put on Front Street, and they know that they, as a collective, is a shrinking population. So they're trying to grasp and do anything they can in order to maintain this last little bit of power, like Custer's last stand. But we do remember what happened with Custer's last stand, do we not?
No, we don't, because they're not teaching history.
Like, you know what? You're right. You're absolutely right. Sorry. Hannah, you know what? That was the best. I got props to you. You're smart.
Right.
There you
go. Right there you go. But again, I love this generation. Of me being a cusp of Gen Z and millennial, aka Zennial, aka elder millennial, aka these hands are rated E. Right. Look, these hands are rated E for everyone, so you know you might want to watch it when you talk about what eldership we talking. Okay, right, that part. But these Z's, they are not taking any of these L's lightly. Yeah, they may have tripped up the 1619 project. Yeah, they might be trying to trip up the critical race theory, which wasn't really even in public schools anyway. But they're teaching themselves. They are doing it for themselves, and they're letting you know that equality without intersectionality is bullshit. And if you don't get on the boat, you will be left behind. Now, with that being said, I want to let you know, make sure that you check out my Cash App. That is $, MOESMITH, P as in Paul, RO. Look, no matter how small, no matter how large, whatever that you're able to find in your heart to give, I am thankful for. And make sure that you also check me out on Ricky Z's other production, No Clue podcast, which comes on every Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. So make sure you check me out.
Yes.
Well, I talk
you.
it out and walk it out.
Right. All right. So my final thoughts is, you know what? I'm going to give some resources, people to look for. So if you are truly wanting to understand critical race theory, you're going to have to do some reading. And along with that reading, you're going to do some critical thinking. So here are some people that you need to be finding: articles, papers, books. One in particular is Miss Kimberly Crenshaw. She's the one that coined intersectionality, and she is also one of the ones that has coined critical race theory, or CRT, along with Derek Bell, Cheryl Harris, Richard Delgado, Patricia Williams, Gloria Latson Billings. I'm going to put this up here. I'm going to do some not really a shameless plug because it's not mine, but critical race theory, the key writings that form the movement, forward by Cornel West, edited by Kimberly Crenshaw, Neil Gotanda, Gary Peller, and Kendall Thomas. There is reading. There are sources. There are ways for you to truly find out what it really means and why this is such an important thing. It's not to scare you. It's to enlighten you. So thank you for joining us tonight for an episode of Talk It Out. You can find me on Instagram at RICKEY_Z and on Twitter at _RICKEYZ, because Ricky for me is with an EY, not with just a Y. I'm fancy like that. But yes, so Talk It Out is a place where people of opposing views can get together and have a healthy and productive dialogue in a respectful way, keeping in mind that it's not always about proving who's right and who's wrong. Sometimes it's simply about listening and being heard. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you, my panelists. If you have not already, make sure you like and subscribe our YouTube channel, Nelly Media, Talk It Out. Find our Facebook page, give us a like, share some of our videos. You can also find us on anchor.fm. If you are just watching this for the first time, you can listen to our podcast whenever you want. It's usually out every other Monday. But thank you again so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. And good night, y'all.
Yay.
Peace.
Good night.
Peace.
When it wants to.
Good.